Good morning, everybody. My name is Stacy Powell, and I run a website called thefinancegym.com, where I teach people real-life tools to get stronger with your money. And being strong with your money also includes your credit score and thus identity theft. So when this Equifax breach happened a couple of weeks ago, I thought I better jump in, figure out what all the experts are saying is the right thing to do, and let my people know. Plus, I needed to figure it out, and I take care of my mom's finances, so needed to figure that out. And it's been quite a learning curve. And so I did a video last week, about a week ago, and if you haven't seen that and are still trying to decide what to do, you should go back and look at that video. You can find it on my Facebook site, and the Finance Gym, and you can also find it on my YouTube channel. So I've done a couple follow-up videos. Saturday I did one that went into more of the specifics about how at risk we all are, and the kind of particulars about what a freeze really means, and what a kind of a pain in the butt it is. So today I wanted to focus on what this all means for our kids, I mean specifically our minor kids. One of the questions that I got when I did this was, do I need to take care of this for my child? And I didn't know the answer to that question, so I started researching. And one of the first things I found when I started researching was I kept seeing this statistic that said kids under 18 are 51 times more likely to be hit than adults. And I'm kind of a statistics nerd, and I thought, well, that can't be true because the stats on us being affected by things like new accounts being opened are 1 in 200. Those are the current stats, 1 in 200. It's much, much higher for other kinds of identity theft, like existing lines of credit being used. But for somebody opening a new account, you have a 1 in 200 chance, basically, of it occurring. And so 51 times, that's 1 in 4. So I started digging into where did that statistic come from and why is that all over the web, and I found the answer. And I wanted to share that with all of you. If you haven't yet seen the infographic that I posted, it's also on my Facebook site and everywhere, and I'll post it in the comments below. But I want to walk you through the prevalence of how risky is this for your children that are under 18. And so I found out a couple of things. The 51 times, I don't like that stat. It's really misleading. However, what I did find out is that our kids are indeed likely more susceptible to theft than we are. And I'm going to walk you through the data geekiness of all of this, so hang in there. But I think it's kind of important to understand what's happening so you can make a decision about how you know what decisions you want to make for your kids. So the data stems from a study done by Carnegie Mellon Scilab, so a pretty reputable university. And what they did was they did a study of 400,000 Social Security numbers that were a part of a database of people that had been breached. So that there was a breach that happened, and they went in to see how many of those after that breach had been impacted. And of the 400,000 or so they looked at, 40,000 were kids. And so they went and looked at those 40,000 minor records and discovered that 10% of them had had some kind of ID theft. Now, when I first read that, I thought, well, of course, because they'd already been breached. That's not a random sample of the population. But here's why it's worth mentioning, is that in 78% of those cases, so the vast majority of those cases, the ID theft happened before the date of the breach. So what they're thinking is, well, of course, it's not related to the breach. So for a huge percentage of the 10% that had some kind of ID theft, it was not related to the breach. So that is really worth looking at. And then also in the other like 360,000 that they looked at of adults, only 0.2% of them had had any kind of ID theft. And so that's where they get the 51. They're looking at the 0.2 versus the 10%. And I don't like that. I don't like that number. That's 51. That's misleading. But what's not misleading is that 10% of those kids have been hit. And so what that tells me and other people that are looking at and writing about this is that you really do need to be aware, be concerned, do things to protect and or monitor your kids' ID. So that's why I decided it was important enough to do this video and really dig deeper into what needs to be done. So, and the other thing is I looked, so this was in 2012, this report was done in 2012, and I looked and looked and looked for a newer report, a more comprehensive report, a more statistical sampling report, and this was in fact the most, the strongest report out there. So that's why I'm basing my data on it. So that's it for the data geekiness stuff. Now I'm going to let you know what to do. So first of all, prevention. Oh, one other interesting thing that I did not know. Did you know that prior to June of 2011, Social Security numbers were issued sequentially? Like, what could go wrong there, right? Which, I know mine were, but I was born in the 60s. 2011. So it wasn't until 6 years ago that they started randomizing the distribution of Social Security numbers. So if your kid was born before 2012, this, I think, applies to you even more. So there's a whole list of what I found, the recommendations to prevent the number from getting out there. First of all, be very picky about who gets your kid's Social Security number. Like, if they don't absolutely have a reason, a mandated reason to have it, don't give it out. So any kind of like sports clubs or anything like that, just say no. Like, they don't need them. They're not protecting them for sure. And just say no. Now, there's a lot of places, schools in particular, that will require you to hand it over. And so you have the right to ask, what are they doing to protect it? Where are they going to use it? Back in the old days, I was talking to my girlfriend about this, and she's like, yeah, they used to post the test scores up there with your Social Security number. So that was eons ago. Nobody's doing that anymore, but I just think it's important to be aware. Also, talk to your kids. And as they get older, talk to them more about that Social Security number and the importance of it, not to freak them out, but just to educate them so that they're really careful about what they're handing over. Keep it locked up. Don't let your kids, like, as they go off to college, make sure that they're not carrying it around in their wallet. So I don't think that this generation carries things around in their wallet the same way the last generation did, but just be sure that it's locked up and not easy to find. Pay attention to the signs. So if you start getting weird things in the mail for your kid, and this, by the way, is any age kid, because again, if you look at the infographic, this isn't just happening to teens. This, although it happens more frequently to teens, this is happening for babies, toddlers, grade school kids. And what happens if your kid doesn't have a credit file begun and somebody gets their number, they can start a credit file and just use a birth date that is over 18. No one's stopping them from doing. There is nothing stopping them, the thieves, from doing that. So that's kind of one of the ways that this is happening. Let me see here. So let me make sure I hit everything on my list. Talk to your kids. Pay attention to the signs. So if you start getting weird mail, things like pre-approved credit offers or something about employment or anything like that in your kid's name, then that is a sign that something potentially has gone awry with your kids' social security numbers. Boom, boom, boom. So those are the areas of prevention that you can do to try to keep anything from happening. Now I want to talk a little bit about monitoring and credit freezes, because that was just a whole other ball of wax that I discovered. So, because the specific question that came to me was, hey, can I put a freeze on my kid's credit? And so it turns out that maybe you can. Depends on what state you live in and depends on which credit bureau you're trying to put the freeze on. And just as a reminder, a freeze on one credit bureau only keeps you 1/3 protected. You need to put freezes on all of them. And here's the deal. Only half the states have passed laws that allow you to put a credit freeze on your minor child's report. And only 2 of the 3 credit bureaus allow you to put a freeze on your minor child's report. So Experian allows it. Equifax, I think newly allows it, not as of a couple weeks, but just as of this year, because I got conflicting data, but I think the most recent thing I found was that Equifax is now letting you do it. And certainly if they weren't before a couple weeks ago, they should now. And TransUnion doesn't. So unless you have found that your kid already has a credit file begun by some kind of ID theft, then TransUnion won't let you do it. If you happen to live in a state that allows it, then they have to. They don't have a choice. And I'm going to post a link. Oh, yeah, I know. So Jen, my friend Jen is asking, what about Innovis? Because Jen is just as much of a data geek as I am. Innovis is the little-known 4th credit bureau, and Innovis allows it. And I've just been leaving Innovis out of these videos because you can only share so much detailed information. But it's true, there's a 4th bureau. And if you want to go to the nth degree, you should include them in all you do. Yeah, I know you can't help yourself. I totally appreciate your data geekiness. But now I've lost my place. Okay, so credit freezes. So, and just from a public policy standpoint, I can't help myself but saying there was a federal bill that they were trying to get passed in 2015 to force the credit bureaus to allow us to freeze our kids' social security numbers. And it never made it through during the Obama administration. And I think I probably don't need to say what the chances of it getting through in this current administration are. So I think it's a state-by-state thing. I'm going to put a link below that shows what states. One of the sites that I used to get some of this information was Krebs on Security, and I think he's the one that had a link to it. It's really useful. His site's great if you really want to get into the geekiness of all this. And on it though, it's about 1.5 years old, and it says that California isn't one of the states. But in all my research, the most recent thing I'm reading is that California indeed has passed a law now and is requiring them. So if you live in California, which a ton of my people do, you should be able to do this. Now you can also call and request a credit report for your kid to see if they even have a file. You can call and just see, hey, I'm finding out if my kid has a credit file. I'm also going to post a link to the instructions about how to do that. And let me just say, it's not easy. So if you're somebody that hates doing this kind of stuff and is looking for an easier way, I'll talk about that in a minute, because you have to obviously prove who you are. Then you have to hand over copies of birth certificates and all that kind of stuff. It's a little crazy. So then you're basically giving a bunch of information to the credit bureaus that have now been determined to not be entirely trustworthy of our data. So that's something to think of. So that's one thing to think about. Like, do I want, like, even calling and checking, to me, I don't have to think about this because my kid's 22. But if she was a minor, I would think about, well, if I call give that number, then they have it. Like, then it's in a database. You have just put it out there when maybe it wasn't out there. So I do think that that's something to think about. I'm not going to give you this is what I recommend, an absolute to do. I think it's a personal decision based on how concerned you are, how worried you are about that kind of stuff. Certainly as your kids get closer to college, it's probably time to go through all that and get that done, because I have heard just a bunch of horror stories about minors, 16-year-olds trying to go out and get their first job, first internship, and not being able to because somebody's used their ID for employment. That's one of the areas that it's used. It's peddled for illegal immigrants. That's not the major area, but it is one of the areas that they're used for. Everything from buying utility or opening up utility accounts, buying cars, those just like low $500 first credit card offers, those kinds of things are where this all plays out. And here's the other really important thing, is that 20% of this is from people that are known. So this isn't just cybercrime out there. A bunch of this happens from people you know, and not like the black sheep uncle who stole the credit card because he's just a bad guy. It's family members who have messed up their own credit, and out of desperation, like people do it, like parents do it to their kids. And I don't mean to laugh, because if a parent's doing that to their kid, if a parent is using their kid's social security number so that they can get the lights put on because their credit's so bad, well, that's desperation, and it happens. That was a really interesting thing that I read. Okay, and then last but not least, I want to talk again, if you've watched the other videos, I talked about buying some kind of ID monitoring service. And the industry likes to call them ID theft protection services. This is not protection. This is not going to protect anything from happening. What it is going to do is it's going to monitor not just the credit bureaus, but a whole bunch of other databases to see if that number pops up, and to let you know right away. And then the good ones will help you walk through fixing it. So hopefully, if it's not floating out there for 2, 3, 4 years of damage being done, the damage is going to be minimized. So I do think that these are good services to look at. I've done a bunch of research, and I might do a video later about the intricacies of why I'm recommending ID Shield, but it's the one that I've ended up deciding that I'm going to use and sign my mother up for. And here's why. Of all of them, they're the ones that very clearly says if something happens, you get a caseworker who does the work of sending letters, contacting the companies. They use a power of attorney, and trying to fix this for you. A lot of the other companies, they walk you through it. They say they're going to help you fix it. Well, yeah, because they basically have a shorter path of Googling for you what you need to do to fix it. And that can be hours and hours and hours, which you can look at via my How Bad It Sucks other infograph. So that's why I'm recommending ID Shield. For an individual, it's $9.95, but for another $10 a month, so $240 a year, you can put your whole family on it, and they will monitor. Again, that means your kids' number is out there in their database, so you have to trust whoever you're deciding to do your credit monitoring, if you want to pay that $240. So hopefully this explained everything, probably in more detail that you were hoping to get, but I'll be interested in hearing from people what their decisions are. I honestly don't know what I would do if I had a kid at this point. I think I probably would pop for the money, and as she got closer to her teen years, I would have done what I could to get a credit freeze put on. So I'll be posting links to a couple of interesting articles and some of the how-to and FTC has a good thing on kids and credit freezes. So for those of you that want to drill down into other information, all the detailed information of where this came from. And just a couple reminders. So I do run this website, thefinancegem.com. If you would like this kind of information and more so information about how to get your money stronger to show up in your email, go sign up for the newsletter. I have an online course walking through the book that I wrote and helping people really jump in and get the work done starting in October. So if you would like to check that out, then definitely go sign up for the newsletter. You'll be one of the first people to find out. And thanks for tuning in. And please share this with your friends that have kids, because I think it's really important for people to know. Thanks much. Have a great day.